At Team Toyota, they've been selling and servicing new and used Toyotas in your community for over 50 years. And you can reserve your next new Toyota with them today. You'll get a realistic timeline, and even in this crazy market, they won't charge you over MSRP. Or don't wait at all. With over 75 certified Toyotas, including a bunch of RAV4 and Highlanders, you can drive one home today. And you can always trust them to maintain your current vehicle. Their service and collision centers are high-tech, comfortable, and will save you time and money. Team Toyota can help you go anywhere you want, but they'll always be your hometown team. Just visit teamtoyota.net and choose from 3 locations in Langhorne, Glen Mills, or Princeton.
They're moving on again. Thanks for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. I am Corey Seidman. He's Jim Salisbury. Sitting here on a Sunday morning after the Phillies beat the Braves 8-3 on Saturday at Citizens Bank Park to end Atlanta's season. And the Phillies are moving on to the NLCS for the first time since 2010. They found out their opponent later on Saturday night when the Padres came back to beat the Dodgers. So, Jim, the Phils are headed out to San Diego, where their season took a turn earlier this season, which we're going to talk about a little bit coming up. But, you know, this weekend against the Braves, it was the first 2 playoff games at Citizens Bank Park in 11 years. The crowd was crazy. The whole weekend kind of felt too good to be true with the early leads, the dramatic moments, the fact that the Phils were able to celebrate on their home field and have another party in the clubhouse.
It was a great weekend. Philadelphia showed itself to be the great baseball town that I know it is. It's a different kind of baseball town. The people love their team. They're into the game. They're into the sport. They love the game. But, you know, you got to put a winner on the field for them to pack that place. We saw it during, 07 to 2011 and even beyond when they had the 257 sellouts. They went through a 10-year drought. It was a tough drought of not getting to the playoffs. And attendance dwindled. That doesn't mean interest in the team dwindled. People just want a winner. And this team has really proven to be a winner. It's amazing, Corey. They win 87 games. They scuffle and fight like hell in the month of September. They didn't play well, but they played well enough. They played well when they had to, won some big games. But they fight and claw to get into the postseason tournament. They win 87 games. They are the 6th seed in a 6-team National League field. They're not even there last year because there's not a 6th team in the playoffs, but they get in and they get hot. That's always been the recipe. Back when the Miami Marlins won as a wild card team in 97 and again in 03, get in and get hot. They have gotten in and they have gotten hot. So they've beaten 2 division champs here in the first 2 rounds. They dispatched a 101 win team in the Atlanta Braves. They held the Braves under 200. I think they hit 185 as a team. Just amazing. And Rob Thompson, I just feel like honestly something special is brewing around that guy. I feel like it's his time. He waited a long time for it, and I just feel like it's his time. But I guess you could say the same thing about Bob Melvin over in San Diego. So, Rob Thompson, the point I want to make is he always throws around and uses the word resilience, that this is a resilient team. And we saw it in September when they were struggling and they're bobbing and weaving. And we saw it all season long when they had the injuries and they came back from them. I thought we saw it in the Atlanta series. Game 2 was not a pretty one down in Atlanta. Zach Wheeler pitched well, but then a 2-out hit batsman, a 2-out walk, and then a misplay in the infield by Rhys Hoskins, and all of a sudden they're leaving Atlanta with their tail between their legs, and the series is 1-1, and they're like, oh boy. They came home and they turned it on with the 6-run 3rd inning on Friday, and then with that performance yesterday, Brandon Marsh with that big 3-run homer in the second, JT with that inside the park home run. And then that pitching plan, which we need to talk about. But I just thought that resilience showed itself again coming back from that Game 2 loss. And, Hoskins was the personification of it with that big home run coming back in Game 3 after, he was booed during introductions. He was booed after his first inning strikeout. And, he's had an interesting career here. He's very streaky. He goes through down times, but then he goes through up times when he carries the team. He takes a licking, but he keeps on ticking. He never puts his head down. And kind of the definition of resilience there. He showed it in Game 3. And then they came out in Game 4, and the crowd was absolutely amazing, illustrating what a great baseball town this is. They were, they sent the Braves home. It was interesting to see. I know there's a lot of controversy about the tomahawk chop, but I mean, the Phillies fans sent Atlanta home doing the tomahawk chop. 45,000 people doing the tomahawk chop, and they did a great job on great player at Austin Riley. Did a great job on a great player in Swanson, who's going to be a free agent, shortstop. Wonder what's going on there. But what a job by the Phillies. Like I said, 87 wins, squeak in, and now they're moving on to the NLCS for the first time since 2010 against another team that, was one of the final entrants, the 5th seed, San Diego Padres. It should be a really fun series.
Yeah, Padres have great starting pitching. It's maybe a little bit of a respite for the Phillies. They don't have to face the Dodgers, but the Padres aren't too far off. And like you just said, Jim, it doesn't really matter this time of year what your regular season record was. The Phillies are the last team standing from the NL East, despite winning 14 fewer games than the Mets and Braves. There's never a bad time to score 6 runs in an inning, but those 2 6-run innings that the Phillies have had in the 9th inning against St. Louis and in Game 1 of that series, and then in the 3rd inning of Game 3 against the Braves, really just completely changed the momentum of both series. The Phillies were losing in Game 1 against the Cardinals, come back, and that kind of sets them on this track. This crazy week of Phillies baseball might not have been the same if they don't come back in that 9th inning. And then in Game 3, after the Braves, to your point, had won Game 2, you're back home. If you fall behind in that game, who knows what can happen? But to jump out to that 6-0 lead, and then on Saturday to have Brandon Marsh come through, hit the 3-run homer early, that pretty much started the party on Saturday. It got the crowd really into it. They carried that energy all the way through. And, there was a quote you had in a story that went up at NBCSportsPhilly.com about the pitching plan. Just like everything worked out. Everything went to plan. That Rob Thompson saying that, the guys have to actually perform. But the way they mapped out Game 4, they knew they weren't going to have their aces. There wasn't going to be an Aaron Nola. There wasn't going to be a Zach Wheeler, Noah Syndergaard starting for the first time in 2 weeks. Somehow it all worked out.
Excuse me. Everything has worked out really the entire postseason except for Game 2 in Atlanta. And I mentioned how they made it work out because they bounced back and they were resilient. But, you go back to that Game 1 in St. Louis. It's amazing in baseball how little moments can beget big moments and can, turn a team around and build momentum. And, are we here on Sunday morning, October 16th, talking about the Phillies going to the NLCS? Are we here if Ryan Helsley, all-star closer, one of the best closers in baseball, are we here if he can just throw strikes in Game 1 in St. Louis? They were shut down that game. And all of a sudden, he can't throw strikes, and he's giving the game to the Phillies, and the Phillies are taking it by having good at-bats, by being selective, by not chasing, and then by putting the bat on the ball when he does come over the plate and having that big rally in St. Louis, that big 6-run rally, and then that big 6-run rally in Game 3 against the Braves, and then putting it away on Saturday in front of another electric crowd. So, little things, and it creates momentum and confidence and belief. And that stuff matters so much in baseball because it's every day. You come back and you're still bathing in that previous day's momentum. A good start can stop it from the other team, and a good start can keep it going. And maybe this is time to segue into what we saw with the pitching plan on Saturday. They got a good start and then some. It was a different kind of start. But it shows one of this team's flaws, that they don't feel like they have that dependable number 4 starter that they can say, here, kid, here's the ball, go out and do your thing. Kyle Gibson faded down the stretch. Noah Syndergaard pitched his way out of the rotation late, had to go to the bullpen, is not as stretched out as he would be. Bailey Falter did a great job as a fill-in, as the lefty, filling in for Wheeler and Eflin and other injured guys down the stretch. But I felt like they didn't think him being a left-hander would play as well against some of the Atlanta Braves right-handed Thunder. Anyway, Zach Wheeler pitches game one. Ranger Suarez pitches game one. Zach Wheeler game two. And Aaron Nola shines again in game three. He's amazing. So, they go through their top three starters and, they put their heads together. The manager, Rob Thompson, and the pitching staff, Caleb Cotham, Brian Kaplan, and Dave Lundquist. I'm sure their analytics people and other folks were involved in the decision-making. And they came up with a roadmap how they're going to get through game four. And teams do this all the time. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Managers think through things all the time. And if the player executes, the manager doesn't. The manager looks good. If the player doesn't execute, the manager looks like a boob. It all comes. Charlie Manuel will tell you this. Successful managers, his players make him a successful manager. Anyway, they came up with this plan to get 27 outs. It was like a relay race. They were going to start with Syndergaard for 9 outs. Then they were going to go to Andrew Bellotti as the lineup came back to the top, and those right-handers presented themselves again. He's got that slider. They thought it would be a good fit. Boom, boom. They gave up a couple runs, but they got through 4 innings, and the bats were swinging it, so they were ahead in that game. And then it was like a relay race. Here, you go get 3 outs, you go get 3 outs, you get 3 outs. And you look up at the end of the day, they got 27 outs, 15 of them by strikeout, and they walked none. That was amazing. That's, whether it's 6 guys or 2 guys or 1 guy, you don't walk guys and you play good defense. You don't give extra outs and you don't give extra base runners. That is how you beat a better team. And that's how they're going to have to advance through the NLCS. You got to play tight defense, good defense. And that can be an issue with this Phillies. We've seen it over and over again. And you can't give extra base runners by walking people. Don't walk people. Play good defense. Get the timely hitting. And you might be popping champagne corks again. That is a recipe for beating a better team. I don't know if the Padres are a better team. I would agree with you. I think they're probably a little bit, even with their starting pitching, they're probably a little better matchup for the Phillies than the Dodgers. But the Padres are good. They have blinding talent on that team. They took out 2 100-win teams. One of them won 101 games. One of them won, I think, 111, the Dodgers. So that is a team that also has a good vibe going. That is a team that feels just that something special is brewing just as much as the Phillies feel something special is brewing. But if your pitching gives you a chance by limiting extra base runs, by limiting walks, and your defense plays airtight, you got a chance. You got a chance. So I just thought that the way they executed that pitching, the way they came up with that pitching plan on Saturday and the way the pitchers executed it was, key in that win. And it was, if they keep going in this thing, we'll look back at that plan and that execution of that plan as being just as important as that 6th inning rally in game 1 in St. Louis. So hats off to everybody who devised it and hats off to everybody who executed it.
Facing the Padres in the NLCS rather than the Dodgers, in my mind, it's kind of similar to facing the Rays in the 2008 World Series as opposed to the Red Sox, a team that was, that had a gargantuan payroll, was probably the favorite. The Rays were a really good team. The Padres are a really good team. It's just a slightly, different matchup than it would have been with the Dodgers. And Jim, just in talking about all the success Phillies pitching had this weekend, they're really shortening games so far in the playoffs because of how dominant Jose Alvarado and Seranthony Dominguez have been. Alvarado in the NLDS appeared in 3 of the 4 games, retired 11 of the 12 batters he faced. Seranthony Dominguez in these playoffs has faced 12 batters, retired 11 of them, struck out 8 of them, and yesterday he was throwing like 101 miles per hour. So that's 2 guys who are at their absolute peak when it matters most. And it's not like they're getting lucky. They both throw 100 miles per hour. It's got to be 2 of the most uncomfortable at-bats in the playoffs right now.
They've both done a great job. I mean, both are really good stories. Jose Alvarado was sent to the minors I think it was the end of May. And he was, anguished over this. This guy had been in the big leagues, and all of a sudden they tell him to go to the minor leagues. And he was really beaten up over this mentally. I think he actually shed some tears. It was very, very hard for him. And he didn't report to the minors for a few days. They had to sit down with him and tell him, hey, this is why we're doing this. We did this with Hector Neris a few years ago. And they wanted him to go down and just kind of clear his head and work on his command. And he came back a few weeks later. He's throwing that cutter more and throwing more strikes. And, since the moment he came back, he's like a different guy. And then the confidence came, and he's executing the sinker at 101 and throwing that cutter for strikes and commanding it. And confidence grows. And then next thing you know, you got a full-blown beast. Seranthony Dominguez shuts down in August with triceps tendonitis. And it was you knock it out of him, but you also get him some rest. And he comes back, and the command in the field is just not there. And I know, I can tell by looking at him, he's a very good-natured guy. He's one of these guys who walks by, always gives you an eye contact and a hello. He's a very classy kid. But, he had his head down for a few weeks. He wasn't looking at people because he wasn't throwing strikes, wasn't throwing well, wasn't feeling good about himself. And then, last couple days of the season and here in the postseason, it has really clicked. Excuse me. The confidence is there for both guys. Both in their own way are great rebound stories, and both are just vital. If this team have been vital to the team's run so far, and going to continue to be vital if they keep it going. So, talked a little bit to the bullpen coach, Dave Lundquist, who's a really smart guy. I mean, pitched in the big leagues. He just thinks Seranthony's body is moving better, and his confidence. He feels like Seranthony knows in the back of his mind that he's healthy, so he can really let it go. And you think just because a guy's throwing 100 or 101 and he's really letting it go. But if a guy's not really feeling healthy, he's not letting it go all the way and getting that extra extension and getting that extra, finish off the fingertips. But Seranthony feels good. He's letting it go. The ball's moving. The ball's doing things. It's coming in 100 miles an hour. Ditto for Jose Alvarado. And I don't know if you saw that quote in one of the stories on our website, but Jose Alvarado said, "We're going to the World Series, I promise."
Yeah, there were some great quotes in that piece. Jim has something up on like just the best scenes and stories from the Phillies clincher. And, there's a great quote from Noah Syndergaard comparing this team to the 2015 Mets team he was on, comparing this team quite favorably. So I suggest you check that out over at NBCSportsPhilly.com. All right, so the NLCS, Phillies and Padres, it begins Tuesday in San Diego. It's a weird schedule for this series. Part of this is because the season started late. There's only one day off in this entire 7-game series. It's after game 2. So that means that if it goes the full 7 games and the series shifts back from Philly to San Diego after game 5, there would be no day off between game 5 and 6 as the teams shift coasts. But the good news for the Phillies is that by winning their series in just 4 games against the Braves, they can start Zach Wheeler in game 1 on Tuesday. He'd actually be on an extra day of rest. This is big news because if they had to go to Atlanta on Sunday and face the Braves in a game 5, it seemed likely that Wheeler was going to pitch in that game. And if he did and the Phillies advanced, that would have made him unavailable probably until game 3 of an NLCS, and he would have been able to go only once on regular rest. But instead, it looks like Wheeler could pitch game 1, Nola for game 2. And, Jim, this is a theme that's been consistent over the last 2 weeks, which is the Phillies taking care of their business early, allowing them to set themselves up nicely for the series ahead. They won the series opener in Houston in game 160 to clinch a playoff spot. Therefore, they didn't need to use Wheeler the rest of that series, could save him for game 1 in St. Louis. They win the series in St. Louis early, get to rest their bullpen for 2 full days. Mm-hmm. And now by beating the Braves in 4, they can line their rotation up the way they'd want for the NLCS.
No question. It's a great way to start with Zach Wheeler. Who wouldn't want to start a series with Zach Wheeler? He's like he's a brilliant pitcher, and Nola is just he's a brilliant pitcher as well, and he's on a great roll. Both of them have pitched tremendous. I mean, to me, Wheeler, he's given up 3 runs in the postseason, but they should all be unearned. I mean, they're earned because they ruled that a hit down in Atlanta. It should have been an error. Whatever. Zach Wheeler's way too professional to worry about that. He just wants to he wants to help his team win a title. It's his first postseason. It's Aaron Nola's first postseason. It's Ranger Suarez's first postseason. Throughout that clubhouse, guys are experiencing their first pro season. But now they've gone through 2 series. They're not postseason neophytes anymore. They should be able to handle all this pressure, and go out there and try to play San Diego tough and see what happens and get it back here to this environment. But that's a tough environment too out there in San Diego. It's funny. I remember covering the '98 postseason. I know I covered the World Series, the Yankees and the Padres '98. I think that was the last time that's the last time the Padres been to the NLCS, I believe, right? Yeah. And that was a really great Padres team, man. They had some players, and the success of that team, much like I think the success of the '95 Seattle Mariners, helped them get a new ballpark in San Diego. They used to be out in Mission Valley, and now they're downtown in what they call the Gas Lamp District. And it's a great ballpark, and it's a great environment, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Those fans will be crazy like they are in Philly. So I think you're always we're up to a best of 7 now, but start on the road, and that's been tough on the Phillies, but it seems to have galvanized them all this time on the road. Go in there and get one, and then come home and really try to feast on this environment. But with Nola and Wheeler and Nola in games 1 and 2, you have a chance to get more than that. Don't walk people, play tight defense, get timely hitting. But as you've mentioned, the Padres have very, very good starting pitching, and they have they have some blinding talent in Manny Machado, and a guy everybody's familiar with over here in Philly is Juan Soto. Saw him a lot with Washington. Everybody knows what a good hitter he is.
Yeah, they also have some other guys who are getting hot at the right time, like Trent Grisham at the bottom of the lineup, dangerous center fielder. Jake Cronenworth is a really solid contact hitter who can bat 2, bat 6, just a helpful player. Padres, they have great starting pitching. Yu Darvish could start game 1 on regular rest. I would think that would be the move. He is their ace. Blake Snell would be able to start game 2 on regular rest. Blake Snell's the guy who broke Bryce Harper's thumb back on June 25th in San Diego. Jim, who would have thought on June 25th or I guess June 26th, the next day when the Phillies left San Diego, that 3.5 months later, they'd be back, that Bryce Harper, who had the broken thumb, would be back and would be red hot. Harper went 8 for 16 in the NLDS with 3 homers and 2 doubles. Zach Eflin also went down in that series as well. And now Zach Eflin's a big part of the Phillies back end bullpen formula. Yeah,
that was I think it was a Saturday night. Shocking to see Harper. Everybody thought the same thing. Oh boy, season over. Well, he came back in 2 months, and Wheeler Eflin went down that night, and he didn't make another start, but he's come back to help out. I wrote down a few of these storylines between the two teams, and there are many, and some are quite obvious. You got the 2 Nola brothers, Aaron Nola and his brother Austin. That's pretty neat right there. They'll be facing each other. Austin Nola is the catcher. They were both the last 2 teams in, right? Which is amazing. They've both taken care of 100-win teams. You got Josh Hader, who, when he was with one of the Phillies' signature wins this year, was when he was with Milwaukee, and Matt Vierling and Alec Bohm took him deep in the 9th inning, and that may have hastened him being traded out of Milwaukee, and now he's over in San Diego. You got Bobby Dickerson, the Phillies infield coach, handles a lot of the defensive positioning for their infielders. He was on that coaching staff, and he clashed a little bit last year with Fernando Tatis Jr., and he's back in Philly now, and he's helped turn this season around because he's helped make Alec Bohm a player. Bobby Dickerson, one of the unsung heroes of this team. He's very close with Manny Machado. Obviously, a few years ago, the Phillies made 2 free agent offers to Manny Machado. He ended up in San Diego, and the Phillies jumped on Bryce Harper. So you got Snell breaking Harper's thumb. You got Manny and Harper. Like I mentioned, they were the kingpins of that big free agent year. The Padres GM, A.J. Preller, started his career as an intern in the Phillies front office. Larry Boa, he managed both teams. And then you got Alec Bohm and Cronenworth were the runner-up for that Rookie of the Year 2 years ago. They tied for second there. You got JT Realmuto and Jorge Alfaro, two catchers. They were traded for each other. Alfaro once came over to the Phillies in that Cole Hamels trade, and the Phillies ended up using him to get JT Realmuto. And wow, was he playing well? He's played well since June 1st. But that inside the park home run was electrifying yesterday. You got Luis Garcia. This was a guy who bounced around the minors with a couple clubs, then was out of baseball, got healthy, threw for some Phillies scouts. Phillies signed him, made it to the major leagues. He pitched for the Phillies for like 6 years of the bad years, in the bullpen. And now he leads the Padres in appearances. He's made some money. He's a great guy. Good for Luis Garcia. Amazing perseverance. And then, you got the last one I'll mention that I wrote down was the two local delicacies, cheesesteaks against fish tacos. And, as much as I love a good cheesesteak, man, nothing like a good San Diego fish taco. So those are some of my storylines. I don't think I missed any. Phillies have two World Series. The Padres have none, and Phillies would like to keep it that way. But one of these teams is going to the World Series. And we weren't even sure they were going to make the postseason probably as late as mid-September.
Yeah, this all would have seemed pretty hard to believe a few weeks ago, but the Phillies are one of the final 4 teams left. It's the Phillies and the Padres. The NLCS begins on Tuesday. Jim just rattled off all those different storylines, stuff we're sure to cover on NBCSportsPhiladelphia.com, as well as on Phillies Talk podcasts to come. So enjoy your Sunday. The Phillies, by winning early, you get to avoid the agita of a Game 5 against the Braves. Now the Phillies have 2 days off before beginning the NLCS at best of 7 in San Diego. So thanks a lot for listening to the Phillies Talk podcast. Goodbye.